if you're chasing the startup dream. Here's the partner who talks about the crash that can come after the big win. Xaver Lehmann built AI startup eBot7 into a 130-person rocket ship and sold it to Nasdaq-listed LivePerson. But behind the headlines, he was filing a port, grieving, burning out, and questioning everything. In today's episode, we unpack what really happens after the exit, how Xaver found meaning again, and what every founder needs to hear before scaling their next company.
Welcome to Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Today's guest is a rare voice in the startup world, someone who has won big and burned out even bigger. Xaver Lehmann is the co-founder and former CEO of eBot7. By the way, we have an interview with the co-founder that we'll link here, one of Europe's fastest growing AI startups. He scaled the company to 130 employees, partnered with major enterprises, and exited to LivePerson, a Nasdaq-listed leader in conversational AI. The company's hybrid AI plus human agent model pushed the frontier of NLP-driven automation. Xaver was recognized by Forbes 30 under 30 Europe and backed by top-tier investors. But the story didn't end there. After the acquisition, he was forced to lay off much of his team. At the same time, he lost his mother to cancer. The mental and emotional toll nearly broke him and made him question everything about startup success. Today, he's rebuilding not a company, but a movement through The Honest Founder, his fast-growing Substack, and his work coaching founders. He's turning pain into perspective and lessons into leverage. This is a conversation about what happens when the hype ends and real life begins. It's raw, it's real, and urgently needed in today's startup economy. Xaver, welcome to Startup Radio.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
That is really an interesting story, and I totally think a lot of people will get a lot out of that. So let's rewind the tape. What was the original spark that led to the founding of eBot7? What did you and your co-founders believe about the world of customer communication that others didn't?
Yeah, good question. I mean, back then in the days, as I was a child, I wanted to be an investment banker, actually. And so I did an internship in investment banking when I was like 21, 22. And I quickly realized that, it was kind of exciting. It was dynamic. I loved capital markets because everything is unpredictable. Everything is new every day. But somehow, like getting to the office every day, seeing my bosses, how they work, how they live, it kind of made me question if I want to pursue that dream. Investment banking is something completely different. It's all about numbers. You go to the office every day. It is dynamic, but also it's kind of, the same every day. And so what I did after the internship, I actually studied again because I didn't know exactly what to do. So I studied finance in Maastricht in the Netherlands. And there I met my, oldest friend actually, who I've known for like 15, 16 years. And he coincidentally also studied in Maastricht. And on the way to King's Day, we had a conversation about what we want to do, at some point, because he had done internships at Red Bull and Adobe, and I had done some internships in M&A and investment banking. And then we thought, to be honest, like I can't imagine a life working for someone. I mean, also my parents have been entrepreneurs their whole life, and somehow I couldn't really imagine working for someone else above me. And he had the same feeling. And then on the way to King's Day, which is kind of the big celebration once a year in the Netherlands where they celebrate the king, we kind of coincidentally, we scrolled through his Facebook feed and saw a Facebook developer conference, really random because we couldn't code or something. We just coincidentally saw this. And what they actually said in that conference was actually that you could, now is the time to actually integrate bots into Facebook Messenger. So people could, or actually companies could integrate into Facebook Messenger and then reach their clients through Facebook or WhatsApp. And we found it a really good idea because, everyone knows about the bad, customer service situations where you stuck in a hotline or wait days for a reply for an email. And we thought,
I couldn't hear you. Did you say yes? No, no, no.
yeah, I mean, honestly, like everyone has had like an experience with bad customer service, right? And we just thought, like, if customers can actually reach their clients exactly where they are, I mean, all of the people are spending time on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on all these social media channels, but companies are not present where they actually, spend most of their time. So that was kind of where we thought, okay, that might be a good idea actually to kind of go to companies, tell them, hey, we have this new technology where you can actually instantly reach your clients through the channels they're already using instead of opening a new channel or hotline or email. And that was kind of the initial spark. And to be honest, like, customer service is just really bad. I think if you want to change something in departments and companies, it would have been customer service. Really manual processes, really recurring questions, always the same. Waiting days for a reply for an email, getting redirected into the wrong person. I hated it. And if we can make something better in that kind of field, we are definitely in for that. And so what we did is actually we drafted several emails, it was like 10 emails, and we shot them out to different companies like Domino's Pizza and like bigger companies and smaller companies. And we pretended to have the, technology already. And we just said, like, hey, we have this technology. You can create bots, you can, link them and connect them to Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp, and you can reach your clients. And then all of a sudden, from these 10 emails, 3 or 4 came back and said, like, hey, that's super interesting. And that was kind of the initial spark that led us to founding the company, honestly, 2 days later.
2 days. Well, that's not a lot for strategic planning, I have to admit. At the time, conversational AI was still emerging. What did like the everyday look back then for AI-powered customer support? It was admittedly the time before LLMs and ChatGPT. What was broken and how did you fix it?
Yeah, I mean, it was back in 2016, so there was no OpenAI, no ChatGPT, no LLMs in this form. So the technology was really basic, to be honest. And the thing was, customer support, I always thought, like, they have some automation tools already. They must have. Like, if you look at O2 Germany, for example, there's like millions of requests of support questions coming in every kind of month. So I thought, of course, they must have something. But then once we went into like a customer support center and looked at how they work, it was crazy. They manually type the answers. They have, sometimes they do copy paste, but then they have to go into different systems. Then for different questions, they need to go to different systems, and then they needed to copy paste that answer in order to make it work for the client. It was a disaster. So once we kind of got a feeling of how the current customer support works, we knew exactly that's a big pain point. So, we can definitely make something work. And so the only problem was that, AI or, the things that we wanted to build, bots, were pretty much at the beginning. So the technology was really early, really not working well. It couldn't understand, detailed or complex requests. The only thing that it could do, or at least our system could do, is actually FAQs. So there was one question from a client, and we could deliver the answer. And what we built because of that, because it could only like not understand any context in a conversation, it could just do like FAQs. We kind of built a hybrid solution, which means that the technology is not, automating the whole time, but it's only automating if a specific threshold is actually met. So you can set it up yourself. Every company could set it up yourself. You could say, for example, the system needs to be 95% sure that this is going to be the right answer, and only then it automates. But if not, then what the system does, it provides a suggestion to the agent. So the agent can actually say, hey, that's the right answer, or that's the wrong answer, or this needs to be edited. And then the system learns over time through the agent's input, which was back in the days a really, good system, because if you work with Deutsche Bahn or BMW or something, the big brands, they didn't want any wrong answer sending out to clients, right? And so with our system, they could go live instantly, and through the input of the support agents, the system kind of trained itself automatically, which was kind of quite new at the time. And I think that was also one of the reasons we were successful.
Mhm. Interesting. What was your like one day moment, the turning point where you knew this startup was going to scale really fast?
I think there wasn't a specific one moment where I knew exactly now it's gonna be, scaling. It was more like, we were just working day and night. We kind of tried to make it work, and I think if you're stuck in a moment, if you're working day and night, you don't look left or right. You don't even know what's happening. You don't even know like that it's actually going in the right direction. If you look at it from like 2 years after that, and you look back, then you think, okay, crazy what I kind of achieved. But if you're in a moment, if you're working day and night for months, for years, you don't even realize if there was a specific moment or something. But if you want to pin me down on like a specific moment, it would definitely be, I think, like the Series A. Like once we kind of got the Series A, we got 6.5 million in US dollar funding. That was the moment where I thought, okay, now we're going to have time and we can spend a lot of money and hire a lot of people. That was the time where I could relax a little bit and, kind of go on holiday also for the first time. So I think that was kind of the moment where I thought, okay, this is going to be scaling fast now because we can hire a lot of people, we can get a lot of clients. So probably in 2019, then 3 years after we founded the company.
I was actually, when I was looking at this question, I was going for a picture when you were standing there in front of an Excel sheet, seeing all the data and realizing I need a new scale because it's going so well.
Yeah, honestly, like over the whole years, over the 5 years, it went pretty well. So we had really good growth rates in the beginning, 200%, and then it went back to 150 and 100% because the threshold is higher. But it was also, planned in the business plan. So like if investors expect something and we expect something from our business, like even if you get a new client and get like 500K in ARR, you kind of expected it to happen, right? And this is also kind of the bad thing about it, because you need to celebrate more and you need to, once you get a new client, you need to really like do a big party and I don't know, but we didn't do that. We just expected it to come, and once the contract came in, we just woke up the next day and worked again like nothing happened before. So it's that's the thing. I think in hindsight I would have done it a little bit different, like celebrate the small wins even more and do a little party or like do something with the team. But we're just like focused on making this work and making it successful, so any new deal wasn't moving the needle for us in the sense of now it's actually getting super successful.
Let us talk a little bit about the struggle behind the growth. Scaling from 130 employees across 5 countries, that's really no joke. What were your toughest operational or leadership challenges as the team grew like 30, then 60, then 100?
Yeah, it's a good question because, of course, it changes over the time, right? So I think once you hit like 20 or 30 employees, it's still super cool. It's really startup vibey. You have a couple of people that help you in some directions, in some ways, but it's more about creation, right? So you're really like, you build something new, you break something, and you just try it all over again. Once you hit like, I would say 50, 60 people, it changes a little bit because that's the time when you need to delegate, right? You need, to hire people, in my case, I was actually hiring a CFO that took over the whole financial and accounting processes. And so that's where it changes a little bit. It was still fun, but it was completely different because you delegated a lot and it wasn't much more creative anymore. But once you hit 100 people, like 110, 120, the whole game changes completely because you're maintaining, you're managing, you have all these people kind of below you. You're just doing recurring meetings. You have these, like kind of weekly calls. That's where it kind of it was still fun, but it was completely different than when I created the company in the first place. So it was kind of a development, not in the best way for me, because I thought like, I'm not the perfect manager. I'm a startup founder. I want to be creative. I want to, break things. And once you hit 100 people, you can't break things anymore at that level, and you can't be so creative anymore because you put everything in the hands of your people. But what you get is the worst problems on earth, right? Like if your team can't handle a specific problem, then it lands at your desk, and it's most likely the worst problems. Like the biggest customer threatens to leave, or the best employees threatens to leave, or like, like big salary negotiations, or like, you just handle and solve big pain points, big problems. Which you need to like. I didn't like it as much as like building the company from the ground up, to be honest.
I actually know how you feel. It's when you get from a founder to manager, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a big transition, to be honest. And I hadn't planned really with that transition because I've never done it before. But it's a completely different life, completely different, kind of working environment. And you also need different kind of people, right? In the beginning, you need like people that are trying things out, being creative and stuff like that, and break things. And at some point, you need kind of managers. You need people that have, done it before, have done it perhaps like for the last 10 years, 15 years already. You need experience, you need skills. It's not only about so much mindset or attitude anymore. It's more about skills and experience. And that changed a lot, I think.
Personal opinion before we get into the next question. I do believe entrepreneur is part of your personality. That's what you enjoy. But if you turn into a manager, then personal feeling, it's best if you have seen this, if you worked in a corporate environment, if you've done some jobs there, then that transition can go smooth. You've raised venture capital, signed enterprise customers, and scaled tech across borders. What was the first big pivot you had to make, and what did it teach you about your assumptions in product market fit?
So when we founded the company, we didn't know exactly if we wanted to actually build a product around it. So what we set up the company for was actually an agency kind of, system. So we just wanted to be the middleman and, in between companies that wanted to, connect and build bots or integrate bots, and developers who could actually build bots. So we just wanted to pay, get a commission and, to connect them, and then we're out of the game. But then at some point we thought like, okay, we actually need to kind of create our own product, because AI is much more difficult to scale and much more difficult to build. It's not like a setup system where you can, like a website, you build a website for 3 weeks, it's finished, you hand it over to a client, and then it's done. With AI, with chatbots, it was more like a continuous process, which you needed to optimize, every time something broke, every time some wrong answer got out and stuff like that. So the agency problem, or the agency company kind of concept, didn't really work. So what we did, because we didn't have a developer yet, we didn't have a CTO yet, we kind of transformed it into a consulting company where we did monthly workshops in different cities across Europe, just to get insights on how customer support actually works. So they paid for their tickets to spend a day with us talking about AI. And for us, it was really valuable because we could get their feedback in order to build a product that's actually worthwhile. So in the meantime, we hired a CTO who was then also one of our co-founders, and we kind of built a product. So from that point in time, it was clear we wanted to build something in customer support. But we also had some shifts. Sometimes, at some point we wanted to build something in e-commerce because we thought it's a better, kind of vertical. We didn't want to spend too much time in customer support centers. But like at the end of the day, we knew customer support is the biggest pain point. So we actually went for customer support at the end. But it taught me that, when you start a company, it's not only about the first idea that's going to be successful. You will change it a lot of times, and probably you have to change it over time because you get more knowledge, you get more, people that actually test your product, and so you will kind of change it in different directions more than you think and more than you want to. But it's a good process. It's good actually for the company, I think, if you turn around a little bit and like adjust it on different ends. So for me, it taught me like, it's actually good to pivot. I think you should pivot if you feel like it's worthwhile and gives you a better direction. And we've done it a couple of times and was really successful at the end.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering, when you scale that rapidly, if you promise that to investors, you get some pressure to scale rapidly. The faster, the better. How did this affect you personally as a founder and human being? Was there something like a moment where you felt the warning signs of a burnout creeping in?
I mean, so the thing is, the first 3 years we've worked day and night, to be honest, like every day, every weekend, every birthday, every kind of family event. So we didn't have one time off. But then at some point after 3 years, my body was pretty bad. So like my parents forced me to go on holiday. And that was the first sign where I thought, okay, shit, because on holiday I didn't recover. And that is always a bad sign. Once you go on holiday and you feel like it's actually getting worse than better, that was kind of the first sign that I needed to change something. So once I came back, I felt a little bit better, but I talked to my co-founders and said, hey, I can't do that anymore. Let's, try to break, like do the weekends off. I can't do it on Saturday, on Sunday every week. Let's also put in some holidays for the next couple of months. And that was the first kind of change that I did in the company. And then we kept on working. We did some holidays. We did some some time off on the weekends, and it was much better. And then it kind of hit me when we were actually doing our Series B. So we wanted to raise capital around 30 million US dollars, and we had done a fundraising process for a couple of months already. And at the end, we found an investor who wanted to invest 30 million from the US. But then at the same time, an offer from LivePerson, the company that had bought us at the end, came in. And so we had to decide what to do now, right? And, at the end of the day, we had a gut feeling that kind of selling the company was actually a much better decision than staying and getting that funding in. And so for a couple of months, we were super uncertain what to do. And at the end of the day, we kind of declined the investor, and the investor was gone then, of course, because the investor didn't want to wait for weeks and months until we decide. So this investor who we found after a couple of months was gone. And so we put everything at stake to make that M&A happen, to actually sell the company. But of course, we needed money. That's why we wanted to fundraise in the first place. So it took longer. And the problem was that we needed extra funding in order to make that M&A process happen, right? So it was a really uncertain kind of time, because we also needed to come to our old investors and say, hey, we want to sell the company. But our investors said, like, why do you actually want to sell the company? So we had kind of an internal conflict. Our investors wanted to keep moving. We wanted to sell the company. And so our investors didn't want to really support us, help us in selling the company. And so it was a little bit of a struggle, but at the end of the day, they, pushed in some money so we could actually do the M&A. But honestly, every day we felt like the acquirer, the potential acquirer, he could always, go, retract from kind of buying us, and we would have been bankrupt within a couple of weeks if they had done it. So having this uncertainty for months, and then in parallel, my mother got sick and got worse and worse by the week, and I had to kind of take care of her too. And all of this happened in kind of the same months and weeks in the same time. And then my mother died, and there was some time where kind of the LivePerson actually wanted to get out of the deal, and then they went in again. So it was always a back and forth, and we almost lost the whole company, having to fire 130 employees. At the end of the day, we were lucky, and it happened. We actually reached the point where we went to the notary, but I was completely burned out. I was completely done after 6, 7, 8 months of fundraising, M&A process, taking care of my mother. And so after that, after we sold the company, I was just completely, destroyed. I couldn't sleep anymore. I couldn't work anymore. I couldn't, read any books anymore. I was completely destroyed. And it took ages until I got better. So that was kind of the burnout, situation. It took me a couple of months to actually feel better and be able to work to work again.
Mm-hmm. What no one saw was that during the 4 year of our acquisition, I was also watching my mother die. That's not a headline, but that's a real story. You actually wrote very powerful about losing your mother during the exit and hitting burnout post-acquisition. For board members, you'll take us behind the scenes, what you hit publicly, and how did that disconnect shape your recovery? I actually know that feeling. It's kind of like all your energy get drained out when you see somebody getting worse and worse and worse, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. It was horrible, to be honest. It was the worst time in my life because it was almost like losing not only my mother, but also the company that I've been building up for 5 years. It was also kind of my baby that I sold. It was just horrible, the whole process. And also having this uncertainty around my mother, but also around the company that it might not happen. And at some point, it felt like it didn't happen. And we kind of needed to kind of decline the deal at some point, but then they came back after a week, but we didn't know that. So it was, honestly, it was back and forth, but we were pretty open, with how we were feeling. I was super open with my co-founders, how I'm feeling, how, the thing is I couldn't really take a time off when my mother died. So I jumped straight into lawyers' calls and stuff like that. So it wasn't like I could do some time off or I could recover a little bit. It was in the midst of the M&A process. I couldn't just leave for 2 or 3 weeks. It was crazy. And I'm pretty open about it because I think that's part of who I am and part of the entrepreneurial journey, right? It's not only about the highs and the best things that happen and the good things, and it's also about the bad things that can happen. And for me, it's also kind of a relief to talk about it. The more you talk about it, the more you write it down. That's why I also started the newsletter. The more, kind of I can also heal from it. So that's why I'm pretty open with it. I'm super happy to talk about it. And I've been that, so open from the beginning on. And I think it's a good thing.
Next question would actually be to ask you how you felt after the exit, but I think we already talked about it. You've once said that the burnout didn't start after the exit, it started long before. What were signs you ignored? What can you give other founders as a warning system? And what should founders watch for before it's already too late?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I've been thinking about this a lot. And my essence or my kind of resume is actually that it's not about the hard and long hours that you work. That's not the reason why I got burnout. Burnout you get once you do something for a long period of time, which you actually don't like to do, right? Which is completely against your will, against your values, against everything you actually stand for. So for me, that was the M&A process. So that's where it actually started. I had some burnout symptoms before too, but I always could actually recover by making holidays, by, kind of doing sport and meeting friends and stuff like that. I was never, kind of, in that kind of feeling that, oh shit, I might get burnout now and I need to really stop. It was actually only when, the whole fundraising process turned into an M&A process, my mother in parallel, that's where, the burnout signs actually started. And, the signs are for me, it was doing something over months. Anyone who has done a fundraising round knows what I'm talking about. It's not nice. You're talking to 100 investors you always asked or, reply to the same questions. It's always about negative things. Why you? And look at this competition. And, then it's about term sheets and contracts. And it's always about negative things. And also during the M&A process, it's always about, how can the buyer protect itself from, like, if something happens, how can we protect ourselves if something bad happens? It's always about, protection, about bad things that could happen, about worst case scenarios. And if you do that over like 9 months or so, and you're not creative, you're not working on your startup, you're just purely in these processes, talking to lawyers the whole time, talking to investors the whole time, you get, really drained from these conversations and from these processes. So at some point, I just thought, like, I'm just a machine. Like, I don't live anymore. I'm just running these processes. On the other hand, I had to take care with my mother. It was horrible. Like, it's, and the signs are like, you feel like a machine. You don't recover anymore. You're super drained. You wake up and you have this like clouds in front of your eyes, and you can't breathe. And I had heart problems during that time. I had, headaches all the time, but really strong headaches, which I've never had before. And I had them for months, like every day for months. So that was pretty bad. And so that was the time where I thought, okay, this is definitely going in the wrong direction, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't just leave the process and leave everyone behind. I was too much driven. I wanted to actually then, make it successful and sell the company at some point. So I couldn't stop, even though I needed to.
But going a little bit down the road, you once stepped away from the second company that he founded. What was your first real step toward healing and clarity, and what began to change?
Yeah, so after the first company, after I sold it, we were in that company for another 2 years because of earnout and because, they of course want you to stay, even though we were pretty bad in terms of energy levels. We kind of kept on being in the company. And after 2 years, we felt actually a lot better. And we thought, what about now? What can we do now? And we thought, like, perhaps we feel better by, founding the next company, just because we wanted to go somewhere, like, perhaps that's kind of a way to heal ourselves. And we kind of were a lot better already after 2 years. So we founded the next company, which was called VidLab 7. And the thing was, we did exactly the same. We hired people, we built up the product, we got investors on board like EQT. So really strong company again. And we did everything from scratch again, kind of similar playbook than we had in the first company. But then, during that time, my body just really kind of told me to stop. Like, I had headaches again. I had burnout symptoms again. I was really in a horrible place at some point. And after around about a year, I just needed to leave. I gave everything back and I just needed to drop out and do something completely different, because my brain, my body, my mind was just telling me to stop and not do this any day further. So it was a tough decision. I talked to my co-founder, I talked to my investors, and it was really hard to actually make that decision. But at some point, I just couldn't do it anymore. And it was the best decision that I've ever taken, to be honest. And then I went to Africa. I spent a couple of months in Africa doing social work. So I support an organization called AMOS, where we support animals in the field and we build fences, and so to protect them from poaching. And then there's other social projects in Cape Town that I support. So we visited some kindergartens and disability homes, which I support now. So that kind of, was an eye opener for me, because I was just all of a sudden with people that have nothing, but they were super happy. And I always thought, like, being successful, having money, being wealthy is like the way to go and be, to be happy. But then I saw all these people that had literally nothing. They were living in a shed, like in a tree house or something. Like, it was crazy. And they were super happy, super friendly, super open. And so that's where kind of my mindset shifted. So I came back from Africa, and then I thought, okay, what could I actually do to help also people, right? Like, not only do something for myself, but also do something to contribute to the society, to help someone actually built something, because I have done it over 10 years. I know how to build a company. I know how to get investors. And that's where kind of I thought, okay, how about I write a book? That was kind of my initial idea. But writing a book takes you like 1.5 or 2 years, and you need to really be motivated to sit down every day and write a book, 300, 400 pages, even more. And I thought, like, how about just sharing quick and small stories every week, because through that I can reach more people earlier, but also I can get feedback on the stories really early. And then at the end, I can actually write a book about it. Right. And so that's how I started Substack. And from Substack, which is a newsletter where I reach a lot of founders and CEOs, kind of coaching evolved. So people would ask me like, hey, you've done it already a couple of times. You've scaled companies. You sold your company for 60 million. Could you actually help me in the M&A process? Could you help me in fundraising? Could you help me in go-to-market? So that's when I started to actually consult companies and consult founders and actually, making these transitions or these challenges happen. And from that, I thought, it's nice to help people one-on-one, but how about I create products that can actually help 1,000 or million people straight away? So now what I'm doing is actually building products like frameworks and digital courses, like a fundraising course, to actually help people at scale. And that's what I'm currently doing. And I'm super happy by, doing that. And it's been a relief. And I just want to don't go back anymore into like building a B2B AI company. It's just not anymore for me.
Many founders talk about reflection, but few were built as publicly as you did. Why did you choose to create a newsletter? And did it help your own recovery?
Yeah, it links to the things a little bit that I said. Of course, like my goal was actually to write a book, because you could put down your thoughts and you can think about them a couple of weeks and months, and you can write down your story. But the problem is with a book, you take ages until you write a book, and it doesn't really like you create value at the end once you kind of publish the book, but you can't create value during the process. So, and all of a sudden, Substack came up. I think a friend of mine told me, and I looked at Substack, and what's good about Substack or in general newsletters is actually that you can just share tiny stories every week and reach a lot of people. And that in connection with my LinkedIn, where I had already like 15,000 followers, I could, kind of link all of these together to actually get a lot of following, and then, help a lot of people through that. So I didn't need to start at zero. I started at already, quite a good following. So I just needed to kind of, tell everyone that I'm actually, helping them through a newsletter, and at the end, then through coaching. And that's why I started all of this. Yeah.
I see that. Actually, a very interesting choice. I was wondering for our audience, what was this one success moment that nearly broke you? Feel free to share it with us and tag us on X or LinkedIn. Guys, we will be back after a short ad break where Xaver reveals the playbook shift that made him a better coach, a better founder, and a better human.
A quick founder insight here. Remote first is great, but it's also a security risk if you're not careful. I use NordVPN to encrypt traffic, keep my admin tools safe, and protect my data even on public networks. It's been especially helpful when I travel. And I even use it to unlock geo-block content or access tools from abroad. The apps are smooth, the speeds are solid, and they don't keep logs. To get the best discount on your NordVPN subscription, go to nordvpn.com/startuprad. With the link, you'll also get 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. Totally risk-free, thanks to the 30-day money-back guarantee. You'll also find a link in the episode description. Now, back to the show.
Hey guys, welcome to our part of the interview with Xaver Lehmann, the co-founder of eBot7, talking about his experience with exit, burnout, and a lot of other private stuff. We are now talking about frameworks, coaching, and clarity. After stepping back, what changed in how you think about success, team leadership, and productivity? Are there some frameworks that now guide your coaching sessions with founders?
I mean, what changed was actually I always thought success is about wealth, is about like, being on stage and in Forbes 30 under 30 and staying in luxury hotels and having sporty cars and stuff like that. But actually, like, my kind of definition of success completely changed throughout the last years, and especially throughout the last couple of months when I spent a lot of time in Africa. So I think it's much more valuable. I mean, of course, I've had the success, and I think for me, it was important to have had success already. So I know it's actually not the solution, right? I think what's more important and what I learned is actually spending a lot of time with your family, with your friends, doing the things you love, being free, just waking up and, working on something fulfilling. And it doesn't need to be a big startup. It doesn't need to be a unicorn. It can be anything, right? And so this is kind of what changed for me in terms of success. And I'm using different tools now that I've kind of developed over the last 10 years to help founders on their journey, right? I also kind of try to, get new ideas and more ideas through different coaches. So I spent some time with Tony Robbins 2 weeks ago. I spent 4 days actually day and night with the guy, and which was crazy and was a really good experience. And also there a lot of really good concepts came into play, and I kind of can use them on my journey and also in my coaching sessions. But it's most of the stuff that I'm kind of teaching is like my stuff is, the things that I learned over the last 10 years. But also in addition, I take some things from Tony Robbins and other great coaches actually into it.
You're now also a coach, helping early stage founders post burnout. What patterns do you see that repeat? Are there mindset traps specific to founders, for example, of AI, SaaS, or tech in general?
I mean, the mindset trap is probably like that you need to be really quick and need to raise money as much as possible. I think it changed a little bit. Times changed. So I think today with, all the vibe coding tools like Lovable, like you don't need to have a big team anymore, right? You can, test out different technologies, different products, within a couple of hours even. So I think the founder journey, completely changed in a different direction. I think in a better direction. But like, the trap is to think that you always have to raise money. You always have to be successful. You always have to kind of build a unicorn. That's actually not true. It depends what you actually want in life. Like you don't even, of course, investors want unicorns because they need to pay back their fund, right? So they need outliers like billion companies to actually return their funds. But as a founder, of course, and that's why, kind of sometimes the values and also kind of the goals are different from investors and like compared to founders, because founders are happy with, like a few millions or 10 millions or 50 millions or 20 millions. Like it depends on who you are and what you want to do, right? But that's where the interests are not really aligned. So the trap is to think that you always have to build a unicorn, which is totally not true. It depends on what you want. You can also build a cool bootstrapped company, which is, successful because you're waking up every day and you feel like, you're really interested in working for it and are really thriving and are exciting. And so it doesn't need to be, investors' money. It doesn't need to be a unicorn. It can just be a small kind of company that you're building over the years. And, I think that's kind of the trap that everyone kind of could go into.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, looking back now, what is the most valuable decision you made during your time, for example, at eBot7, that wasn't so obvious at the time?
I mean, perhaps it's obvious, but for me, it wasn't back in the days. I was really drowning in work after like 2 or 3 years at working at eBot7 because I was kind of the guy for everything. I did finance, I did operations, I did admin, I did HR, I did sales, I did fundraising, so almost everything kind of. And what was a big relief for me was actually when we raised that Series A and I could finally hire people that could take over my work, which is redundant, which was kind of repetitive and always the same and didn't create that much strategic value in our company. So there was the time when, getting the money, but also spending the money on really strong people who have done it before was a game changer for me. Because back in the days, we didn't have a lot of money and we needed to find ways to get people on board, which were probably not, the most skilled, the most experienced people at the beginning, because you needed to train them a lot. But at some point we could just take money, get the best people on board, and this changed everything for me.
Who was the most impactful customer or partner for EBIT7 and why? What made the relationship really transformative?
Definitely O2 Germany, I would say. So they were kind of the first customers we got on board. They were also the ones that shaped our product. They kind of offered us also to visit their customer support center. They were super helpful, super easygoing. They were one of the best customers. And in connection to that, Vira, which is kind of the accelerator of O2 Germany, which kind of we got into Vira first, and then we got actually into O2 Germany. That's kind of their vehicle to look for innovative startups. And so I think Vira in connection with O2 Germany was definitely, kind of the most important partner for us at the time. I think back in the days until, 5 years later, they were the biggest customer of ours. So yeah, and whenever there was any problem with the technology, they were the first ones to tell us, but not in a bad way, in an angry way. They were super productive and just telling us what to do. And yeah, that was amazing actually.
You scaled quite impressively with this company, but many founders do hit a wall when scaling somewhere between 30 and 100 people. What advice do you give today for managing culture and energy at that stage?
Yes, I'm a little bit torn between two worlds, because on the one hand, you need to grow the startup into something like a corporate, right? So you need different kinds of people for a bigger company, because you need skilled people, you need experienced people who have done it before, because you at another stage, you're also working with different kind of companies. So, but also on the other hand, you shouldn't lose your startup vibe culture, because that's essentially why actually people decide to work for your startup, right? To have, cool people around you who, you can go for lunch with them and they're not colleagues, but actually friends. So this is kind of, it's quite hard. You need hierarchies, but also you don't want that many and too deep hierarchies. You don't want to be a corporate, but you also want to kind of keep the startup culture. That was also kind of a little bit of difficult to find a balance between those two. So this is what I would actually say.
You know what? I personally have always Google in mind when I saw this, because under the founders, it was a big company, it was a listed company, it was a very successful company, but it still had some startup vibe to it. But then at one point, under new leadership, under Alphabet, it completely changed, and a lot of the stuff that made the startup feeling, at least watching from the outside, disappeared. And that's the point where I thought, you cannot keep it for eternity if you want to be big, if you want to be growing.
Yeah, probably. I don't know if it's possible. You need to change your startup, your environment a little bit, but I would always suggest not to do it too much and just, to keep the startup culture, because I've seen it a lot. Founders growing into big companies, like having 100 or 200 and 300 people and getting these, corporate structures, because they hire corporate people at some point, and corporate people are, kind of, they expect corporate structures and they establish corporate structures. So at some point, all of a sudden you're becoming a corporate. And I think that's where you have to be careful not to be too much of a corporate, and have too much processes and too much structures. And because at the end of the day, that's why you were successful, because you were quick, you could, break things, and you could hire people that, are really like a different mindset, different attitude. So, that's kind of the different balance that you need to keep.
Actually, personal experience, personal feeling is you're still a startup if you do the management decision at a stand up in the morning, like 10, 15 minutes, you're fixed. Everybody's on the same page. We keep going. and you're corporate if you have to track all your decisions in an Excel sheet or something like that.
Yeah, probably. I mean,
he's smiling. He's smiling.
That's one of the things you can say. Yeah, but it has a lot of different variations to it, right? So yeah, but probably if you have a lot of recurring meetings and a lot of hierarchies in your companies, then it's a bad sign, I guess.
For the Vault members, you walk us through your founder hiring diagnostic and the early signals that tell somebody's building the wrong team. Everybody will be able to find the link to the Founders Vault down here in the show notes. We'll start it pretty soon for subscribers only, and we're already very excited about it. Looking now a little bit forward, what excites you most about the intersection of mental health, coaching, and the next generation of founders?
Yeah, so I mentioned it a little bit earlier. So a lot of things have changed over the years, right? So you've got LLMs now like ChatGPT, where you can literally build something from nothing. You don't need big teams. I think you will definitely see unicorns, like really big companies with just a few people on board. So it's really exciting. But also I hope that, founder teams can actually incorporate some of the mental health strategies and like recoveries into their daily practice, because that's super important. I didn't do it. I went into burnout. So I hope, founders will not take the same route. And because of AI, because it's super dynamic and super fast, the probability that you go into something like a burnout and like something like a depression is much, much higher than if it's like a low past environment, right? And so I would strongly suggest to keep your body and mind in balance, and kind of try to take advantage of the whole development around AI, because you can build something from nothing. You don't need a big team anymore. You don't need big fundings anymore, and that's the beauty of it. And at the same time, you have to keep your body in balance.
A discussion that I had with some friends recently was one should move the school into teaching more about mental health, about meditation practices, than actually writing essays, because right now you just need to talk to an AI and it will spit out a perfectly structured essay, but nobody takes care of your mental health there. Just food for thought for the people out there. I was wondering, don't worry, I know predictions are always difficult, especially concerning the future, but what predictions would you make about AI startup culture over the next 3 to 5 years? Are we heading for more founder fatigue? Are we heading for more founder fatigue or a healthy reset?
So I hope, of course, it's going to be a healthier environment, but there's a high probability that it's going in the other direction. So the thing is, with AI, it's really fast paced. It's with technology, you get not happier but lonelier, I would say, because you don't meet you meet less friends, you are less in public on the outside. And I think you can see it already with the current generation now. You go to a coffee place and then everyone is on their phones, and like especially like 7-8 years olds already like with phones, and they're back in the days we went playing football and we went going out with friends and stuff like that. We didn't have devices, so there's a lot of things that changed, and I think it's gonna get worse. And I just hope that there's like kind of a contra movement towards like more, spending more time in nature, spending more time with family and friends. Because at the end of the day, it's about, being healthy and not being lonely, being happy. And if you just spend your whole time, your whole life on devices, it's not going to be good for you.
Yeah, I also have something for myself, like my own rule. I also use all the information that I put in different AI tools, because I work with them for hours and hours, because I'm basically here by myself. Chris is in New York. We're in different time zones, and editor and VA are also in different time zones who help me with all the publications and the back office and stuff. So I'm basically here just simply with my AI. I made a habit out of it to ask them what they know about me that would be useful for me. plus give me regular reminders and practices to stay mentally healthy, to stay fit, and so on and so forth. So basically, you can also make the AI work for you in that respect. And there's a lot of stuff out there what you can do. Just food for thought and start your own research. But not doing research, asking you here, what's a popular belief in startup land, but you would firmly disagree with?
I would say it connects to something that I talked about earlier. It's about like the belief that you have to build a unicorn, and investors always expect to build a unicorn because of course they need to return their funds. But like deep down, honestly, it depends on what you want to do in life. Like for founders, a unicorn doesn't need to be the perfect outcome because there's also a lot of dilution, a lot of funding rounds. Like, unicorn is something that startup land kind of wants and expects and something like that, but it's actually something completely stupid, because you don't need to build a startup that's worth $1 billion or something. You don't need to do that. Like, I know that some founders, like, they're trying everything they can to build a startup in that area, and then expect or actually demand higher valuations, then at some point they dilute, and they have, at the end of the day, have like 1 or 2% on the company, and then it's $1 billion worth. Like, it's better to bootstrap your company to 1 or 2 million. You've got more than if you have $1 billion and like nothing left. So I would say that's something like a popular belief, but I would not say it's true.
Totally agreeing with you here without any external investors in Startup Radio. But I, I was I was wondering, when you've been talking about that, is this a firm belief of startup land, or is this a belief of investor land pushed into startup land?
Yeah, probably the second. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, they need to return their funds, so they of course expect startups to perform really well, and like well means higher valuations and higher exit volumes and stuff like that, right? So it's interesting.
For our audience, I was wondering if you guys could redo your startup journey with just one lesson from today. What would you change? Tag us on social media, Startuprad.io, and use Startup Reset. Xaver, final two questions. We're talking about almost for an hour now. Some final reflections here. If a first-time founder stopped you at a cafe, so not playing with his or her device, and asked you, what's one thing you wish you knew earlier, what would you say?
I would probably say that mental health is more important than you think. I mean, I've done the whole journey, and I always neglected it. I kind of worked my ass off day and night, and I didn't pay too much attention, towards, meditating. And I mean, I did my sport the whole time. I did my workouts, but, having enough pauses, doing lunch breaks, having weekends off, that's super important. And that's something I would definitely say, take that more seriously.
Mm. Weekends off is also one of my rules. What's the boldest, most honest thing you've learned about yourself through like the complete journey, everything you went through?
Honestly, I would say that I would probably say, and I wouldn't have admitted it back in the days, but I think I thought that money solves all problems, but it definitely doesn't. And I think freedom solves most of the problems. Like, my values changed a little bit, in the sense of, first I wanted money. I wanted to be, financially free. And now it's about freedom of work, freedom, whatever I can do whenever I can with whom I want. So my kind of feeling of like my values changed a little bit in that direction. So I thought money was kind of the answer, but it's not.
Awesome closing words, Xaver. Thank you very much. It was such a pleasure talking to you. Actually, we had such an intense and long conversation that we need to have a second interview session just for you to give us your wisdom in the founders world. Everybody who would like to learn more, go down here in the show notes and subscribe to the founders world, and we'll see you back shortly, answering a few questions for our audience there. Sarah, it was a pleasure having you as a guest. Thank you very much. Best of luck and keep us updated. And of course, everybody will find your Substack newsletter down here in the show notes as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. And see you next time.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.